Yeah, hello and welcome to this video. This is the book review for the end of the year 2018. Yeah, I tried this camera angle again. I did something similar last year and I hope it's going to work out fine. You see the whole board this time. Last year I had only half of the board visible, but I think it's better that way. I can always I put the book like here and you see what it is. I think it should be a good way to do it. For some of the books, we don't even need the board all that much. For the opening books, I think it's quite useful, but for the other ones, probably not so much. So let's get going. Last year, I did a really long video. It was, I think, almost 1 hour. And it also included some of the books that weren't even published in 2017, in this case, but some old favorites that I wanted to present. And I don't have any old favorites this time. What I wanted to include, I basically included last year. I don't think I forgot anything there. So I'm mostly focusing on new books, or I have one book actually that is a bit older, 2 or 3 years maybe. I have to check it, but it's one book that I only recently started to use in my training. And I think it's quite good to mention because it's not very well known, and I think it is quite good. Anyway, we'll get to that later. First of all, before I get to some of the books, I wanted to mention something about my own products. Of course, because I had a book released this year as well, a traditional print book, the Keep It Simple 1E4. Yeah, very well known probably to you, to my channel, regular channel visitors. What I mostly want to say about it, and it's really not useful for me to tell you again what it's in and so on, but what I wanted to tell is that the follow-up basically is already in the works. Keep It Simple 1D4 is going to be the next release on Chessable and later as a print book. It's already in the works, so if you are more of a D4 guy, that's one that you should be looking forward to. I'm shooting for release April, May, something like that, so 4 to 5 months. Maybe quicker, maybe longer. I mean, I have the concept lined out, but it will be a long way until 1D4 is fitted into one book. Anyway, that I wanted to mention. I mentioned it already in some other occasions, but this is a good way to announce it, I think. So let's get to books by other authors, and this is a lot. I think I'm close to showing you all the books that I got this year. I think I'm very close to that. I made a conscious effort to buy less books because I simply don't have the time to look at all of them, and it is it's almost a waste of money to buy like 50 books a year. What can you do with them? You cannot read them, it's just not possible. So I try to really limit myself to the ones that I felt were useful to me, were interesting to me. And there's also the odd book that was sent to me for review. I mean, I think 90% of the books I bought myself, but there are 2 or 3 in there that were sent to me by New in Chess. I mean, I've published my book with New in Chess, and they tend to send me some of the newer books to review. So let's get started. I want to mention 2 books that are already featured on my channel, but they are amongst the I think most interesting releases of this year, so I should be mentioning them again. The first one is the Woodpecker Method. I've had this on the channel before when it was released on Chessable. It is by Quality Chess, and it is mostly about improving your tactical vision, by solving a set of exercises over and over again. I think this is a very interesting method to try to improve your tactics. But I would like to refer to you to the video I already did some month ago. I also think this is a print book, of course, but it has this Chessable release, and I strongly recommend the Chessable version because it is simply the solving the tactics puzzles is excellently done online. It's just easier than in a print book. and it helps you to track your progress very nicely. The second book, and this is probably my favorite book of this year, especially I think it's always difficult to compare an opening book to a middle game or general improvement book. So this is the one. It's Small Steps to Giant Improvement by Sam Shankland. It's his first book, and I also made a video on that already when it was released on Chessable. They had a good discount on Chessable, so it was a good one to point out. It's a really excellent book on chess strategy, I think, and it focuses on pawn play, as you can maybe guess. Yeah, the small steps are the pawn moves, and it has the second title, Master Pawn Play in Chess. Again, I don't want to talk about it for too long. I think I made a video on that already, and I don't want to repeat everything that I said there. I think it's a really great book, many good examples. I also like the writing style. Sam is it's a very straightforward. He has a very straightforward way of expressing a thought. Very honest, very clear cut, and that is also, I think, very much a virtue of his writing. Okay, now let's get to some books that I have not yet featured on my channel. Let's go with the probably most unusual one first, and in some way maybe the most interesting one, because it is not really comparable to anything else that was released. It is this one. It's called Under the Surface by Jan Markos. Markos is a grandmaster from Slovakia, and this is a really out-of-the-box book. It has a really funny cover, by the way. It's very tough probably to... You can actually see it quite well on the video. You see, it has this picture of the Titanic, going towards an iceberg, and it's it shows that there's one move above the surface, but many moves below, and it's kind of the philosophy of this book that in chess we often see something quite simple, relatively simple looking over the board, but there are many things hidden under the surface. And it is a really tough to describe book in a way. It has many chapters. It has 33 chapters in 20, how many pages? 300, almost 300 pages. And it has many different subjects. It's more of a collection of essays or collection of single topics than, let's say, one monolithic book that wants to convey a certain point. It has a certain strategic points and ideas that it presents. For example, I'm going to give you one example. The second part is called About the Inhabitants of the Chessboard. And what he does is he makes those small chapters of 10 pages where he shows a particular feature of pieces, how bishops move. And one interesting chapter there is about Karpov's billiard ball. So he talks about Karpov's uncanny ability to use his bishops in a way that they would, I can show you that on the board, like the bishop would go here, and then like on a billiard table it would basically go here next, so it bounces off the side of the board and then goes this way. I know it sounds really odd, but he collected many examples where Karpov had exactly this thing, in particular on the first rank, like bishop back and then here or something like that. It's really quite remarkable. He also has some chapters about statistical, let's say, or statistics about openings, like how many minor piece endings do you get from a particular opening. That sounds really odd, but it's kind of interesting, because if you think about this a little bit, there are definitely differences there. In particular, when it comes to things like the bishop pair, for example. In some openings, you will get the bishop pair more often than not. For example, let's say you're black, you play the Sicilian Sveshnikov, that is what you aim for. You will get the bishop pair a lot, because white will quite often... I'm just going to maybe put the first moves on the board. If you are in the Sveshnikov, and this is the starting point there. White will more often than not play bishop g5 and later trade here, so black will get the bishop pair a lot. If white wants to avoid the Sveshnikov, they actually quite often, if we go back, will play the Rossolimo, which also gives you the bishop pair a lot. So the black side of this opening means that if you are a bishop pair fan, this is maybe one for you. You get the bishop pair a lot. And there are many other very out-of-the-box ideas that he presents in the book. Very interesting topics here about computer chess, like the development of chess engines, what they were able to do a while ago, what they're able to do now. And also quite interesting is one longer chapter is an interview with one of the maybe the best current correspondence chess player, where he shows or explains how he uses engines, what his own contribution is to his own playing ability, when the engine is obviously much stronger than he is, but he still has some input to what happens on the board, because he has to filter out things by the engine that are not that great and so on. It's really quite interesting. The only thing that is not so clear with this book is, what does it actually help you? Does it help you to be a better chess player? Maybe, but it is the kind of reading experience where you think, oh, that's interesting, I've never thought of that before. But it's not, I believe, a very typical book that can be used for training, or it doesn't have any exercises, for example. It just has many of those moments where you say, interesting. Yeah, and this makes it quite remarkable. It's just very much not like any other book that you usually get. So I think it's very interesting and worth getting. Mostly, I think, for stronger players. It won't help, let's say the typical 1600, 1700 player, but if you're, let's say, like 2000 and above, and you are interested in out-of-the-box thinking, it can be something for you. This book has won the English Chess Federation's Book of the Year award, ahead of Sam Shankland's book, which I kind of understand because it's so different, but I still would prefer Shankland's book simply because of usability. It has exercises, and it has things that I think can be more helpful for the general player and for a wider range of playing strength. I don't see a 1500 reading Marcos book and getting much out of it. I think many of the concepts are just a little bit too advanced, or simply too much out of the book. I mean, there's this famous Korchnoi quote, in order to violate principles, you should know them first, and this applies a little bit to that book. It shows interesting points, but you only appreciate them as interesting and out of the box if you know what the box is, so to say. Okay, now to something a little bit more standard, let's say, and I think this is a very, very strong recommendation, actually, if you are into the market for those books or these kind of books. It's actually, there are two books. It's this one, Playing 1e4, how it's called exactly, French Defense and Sicilian Sidelines is the first one, and the second one is Playing e4 Sicilian Main Lines. So this is by John Shaw and the Quality Chess team. They already made the Playing e4 book with minor lines and 1e5. That was at the end of 2016, I believe. And now this year those two books were released at about the same time in the summer. So I've written a book on 1e4. Keep it simple, 1e4. My book has 380 pages or something like that. And the Playing e4 books by Shaw, how much do they have? 430. Let's check. 350 roughly. And so all in all, we've got like 2,200 pages or something around that. Maybe 2,100. So it's a lot bigger. if you want even more, more material, you can go for Neji's books. There are thousands of pages. So you have different level, let's say, of detail and different level of sophistication in those repertoires. My book is called Keep It Simple because it is reasonably simple to learn. So, for example, if you look at the Sicilian defense, I went for Bishop b5 Sicilian here, and I went for Bishop b5 check, or in case of e6, I went for c3. If you look at Shaw's book, he's got the, this is why it's basically 1.5 books Sicilian. He goes for the open Sicilian. Yeah, I think invariably, they don't go for the Rossolimo or anything. It's just always the open Sicilian. So this is much more theory, and it's much sharper. You need to learn many more lines. In case of the French, by the way, where I recommend the exchange variation, and I'm very happy still with this recommendation, they have the Tarrasch, which is basically what I would recommend if you don't want to play the exchange and want to be a little more sophisticated. So these books are excellently researched, as are all quality chess books, and they can be, let's say, the step up from my book. I would still, I've written this book for a reason, and I think it is a good one. But maybe at some point you want to expand, you want to, in some cases, sharpen up your repertoire, you want something a little bit more, let's say, tactical and confrontational, and then those books can be exactly this step that you can take. With 1e4, you don't have so many transpositions as you have with d4, so it is quite easy if you say, let's say you get those two books, you have the Sicilian, you got the French. So let's say you like lines in my book that start like that. You like the Rossolimo, and you like this one, but you say, this c3 is not sharp enough. Let's expand a little bit, and why not do this? So you can, in this case, keep parts of my repertoire, but adopt some open Sicilian lines without learning or having to learn absolutely everything. For example, in this case, you would need something against a6, against knight c6, and knight f6. So there's no dragon, for example. There is no Najdorf, there's no Sveshnikov, there is no Kalashnikov, whatever. So you could, in many cases, start with my book and then expand with those books. It's a matter of taste, and also in some cases, do you want to play the open Sicilian, or do you want to play a more strategically focused line? I think this set of books, again, there are 3 books. The third one is from 2016, and now they published the final 2 ones. They can be an excellent step after having my book. Or you can, it's your choice. You can skip my book and directly say, okay, let's go open Sicilian and so on. And they're excellent, It's just what it is, very well researched, very well written. So it's kind of this is the middle tier, let's say, E4 repertoire book. If you want to go the Neji books, the Grandmaster repertoire books, they are really close to overkill. He's got like, I don't know how many books, 3 books on the Sicilian or 4 or so. It's really, really, really tough to do that, and not really suitable for an amateur. I think the playing E4 by Shaw is borderline. It is doable, but it's already a lot of theory. Okay, so let's continue with some more opening books. Let's do the opening books first, and then go to the non-opening books. So let's do it like that. So what opening books do I have? I actually got 2 only 2 or 3 days ago, and no, that makes no sense. It was Christmas. Like the day before Christmas or so, I got 2 books that I cannot review because I got them and I haven't really looked at them. The Queen's Indian Defense by Michael Royce, and what was the other one? The Chigorin Bible. That's a very interesting one by Sokolov and Salgado Lopez, but I have not really used the books. I just gotten them and like, okay, nice, I have them now, but I didn't really look through them, so it's tough for me to review them already. In particular, the Chigorin book is of course interesting because that is like my opening with Black, or one of my openings. Okay, the next one, the modernized Caro-Kann. A book on the Caro-Kann, yeah, by Daniel Fernandez. Fernandez was not known to me. He's a grandmaster. I think he's British, yeah. Doesn't sound too British, but I think he's from the UK. This is a book published by Thinkers Publishing, a new publishing company. And it's a pretty nice book, I think, on the Caro in particular, because it features some lines that are not as regularly featured. Okay, let's get going. The Caro-Kann is, of course, this one, E4, C6. And the main choices that Black has are actually against the advance, where you need to make a choice. What exactly do you want to play, what setup, and in the main line position. Yeah, and what he has recommended, I think, is interesting. Here, basically every book that I know, I think there is one by Bologan, there's one by Jovanka Hauskar, and they all go here. Yeah? Bishop F5, the so-called classical variation. And this book is different. He's recommending knight d7, a line that is often, how does he call it actually? Associated with Smyslov and Karpov. Do they? No, he doesn't. He just says knight d7 variation. Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. It's usually called Smyslov or Smyslov-Karpov or something like that. Knight d7 is a perfectly playable line, but somehow not in fashion. And I think this is a good recommendation. Bishop f5, I really think is not for everyone. I've looked at this over the years, and Black basically has two choices after bishop f5. You can castle short later or long. If you castle long, if you castle queenside, you're like eternally slightly worse, and if you castle kingside, I mean, at least I tended to get checkmated a lot. It's not bad, of course, but it's not for everyone. It was not for me, for example. So this is a good one, knight d7, preparing knight f6. That is what Karpov played most of the time. So a good line to cover. What he does also is he covers in the advance, and I think this is very useful. In the advanced variation, he covers two lines after bishop f5, knight f3, the short system. He covers, we're talking about this. He covers c5 and knight e7, two main lines, and he gives an overview also, which is a little bit less convincing. He misses one or two things, but it's not super problematic. This one, what he calls the Arkel-Kenkin variation. So he gives Black a pretty wide range of choices, and I think this is good, yeah, because the advance you will get quite often, and knowing more than one line makes a lot of sense. The advanced variation is probably the critical line against the Caro. Yeah, I like the book, and I like the line selection a lot, because especially knight d7 is totally undercovered in chess literature, and I think he does a good job. Yeah, a nice one. I like the book. I think this is also on Chessable if you prefer an online version. Okay, then a book that I also cannot tell you too much about. I will still mention it because it's also really fresh here on my shelf. But it's this one. It's difficult to read, right? Because of anyway, it's called Play D4, D5, C4, E6. Very generic title by Alexei Kornev. Here by Chess Stars. So what he basically says is with Black you should play the Queen's Gambit declined. And I mentioned this book for one particular reason. It is actually quite similar to a book in his choice of lines, yeah, it is quite similar to a book that I had last year in my reviews by Untitled, the D4, D5 classical repertoire. And what Kornev here is doing is he recommends a similar set of lines, but there are some things that, sorry, that was close to a big sneeze here. He recommends a similar set of lines, but with some twists. And I think the twists are interesting. So if you are interested in a black repertoire with D4, D5, that can be an interesting book. I have not yet studied it in a lot of detail because the book is quite new on my desk, let's say. So what I think is interesting is the following. He covers with black, he covers these classical lines, and if white plays in this way, he plays the same system with knight bd7 as Untitled does. It's what is currently in fashion. However, there are some differences in other lines, and this is mostly here in the exchange variation. Here Untitled covers the most natural move e takes d5, but Kornev goes knight d5, which gives an entirely different type of position that is more it's rather transpositional. It will often transpose after e4 takes into a semi-Tarrasch with c5, which is totally different. And it is an interesting line to play because I think white players will have relatively little clue what to do. They don't get this often. So it's an interesting line. I mean, it's a matter of taste as always, but I think it's interesting to cover that. The most interesting choice, however, in the book is that it basically has two parts. One is the, let's say, conventional Queen's Gambit, and then he has an offbeat part. And the offbeat part is interesting, where he covers knight c3 and now the move a6, which looks odd, really odd. But a6 is actually quite an interesting line. It has been played by many strong players, even by modern day stars like Magnus Carlsen. A6, weird move. Black basically intends to capture and then be ready to play b5. So white has to think about this, if the capture is a problem or not. For example, if white plays a slow move, black might take and try to keep the pawn. The same idea is also played here, knight f3, a6. That dates back to Alekhine in the 1920s, and this is actually surprisingly interesting. Black has again this idea to take at the right moment, and it can lead to completely unexplored variations or variations that are only starting to develop. For example, knight c3, knight f6. Now if white takes on d5, that's an interesting form of exchange variation where white is committed to knight f3 early on. That is not ideal. And black even has totally new setups here with bishop e6, knight c6 at times. It's really quite fascinating that this is a newly developed way of playing that is not so much known. In fact, what Kornev did here, he kind of he was just quicker than me because I was thinking of presenting such a repertoire at one point, and he also caught this trend with early a6s that can be interesting for black. So I think it's a very interesting topic. I have not really looked through the book in much detail, so I cannot really tell you, okay, this is fantastically done or whatever. I think the selection and the topic is really interesting. So I wanted to mention the book and point you to this interesting way of playing. The final strictly opening book that I'm going to cover is this one. The full, okay, you can put this back. It's called The Full English Opening by Carsten Hansen. Carsten Hansen is a FIDE master from Denmark, and he has written really lots of books by now. He's got 20 something books, I think, written, and Yeah, this is a book that you rarely see nowadays, a type of book that you rarely see nowadays. It's about an opening, in this case, of course, the English opening with 1c4, and it is not a repertoire book, but rather shows, yeah, everything that there is to a certain depth. It's not super deep, obviously. The book has 450 pages, about, yeah, 460. So you cannot show everything, yeah, that there is. Then you would have a 1,000, 2,000 page book. It's just information explosion nowadays. But Hansen, I think, does a good job of basically condensing that to the fundamentals. I mean, it's called mastering the fundamentals, to the fundamentals of the opening. So if you are interested in the English opening, you will get information about basically everything to a certain level of depth. So it's not a repertoire book that will only show you a suggestion what to play, but rather everything a little bit. And if you're interested in the English, I think it's a very good book to start with, because you get a lot of information already to begin with. And at a later stage, you might want to specialize using something else. But Hansen is a very diligent writer, and he's written books on the English before. So it's a very good starting point if you want to learn about this opening, which is very versatile and therefore tough to cover in a single volume book. So I think he did a good job there with this one. Okay, that is about 1c4. So I've got one more opening book, and this is the only book in the whole review that I really think you should not buy. I mean, I'm not saying buy everything that I recommend, but I'm just saying, okay, these books are, I think they are either good, like my opinion, or I think they are fresh and interesting. I cannot really say that I've read the ones that I got like a couple of days ago. But this next book I don't get, simply. I don't understand why it was published and what the point is. Okay, here it is. It's called, what is that called? Grandmaster Opening Preparation by Jan Ehlvest. And I got that book from Quality Chess, and they usually really have a high quality in publication. But that book I just don't understand. I don't understand the point of it. I mean, for example, this book has 270 pages, so it has 130 pages on isolated queen pawn positions out of the Tarrasch defense in the Queen's Gambit. And honestly, I don't see the relevance. I mean, if you want to just know how to play against this, theoretically speaking, it's easy. White is better in many lines, and they're not tough to find out. But it's not like he mentioned them even. I mean, he gives some more of a overview on middle game ideas, but these games are all really I mean, they are all well known. There's nothing new about it. And I didn't quite get the point. And there are some really odd chapters. I mean, there's one chapter that has just one page, and it makes no sense. It's kind of weird. It's a really weird book, and I don't really know any positive effect that it could give you. You know, so it's very strange in my opinion, and he also gives some theoretical information that is just outdated, and I don't know why it is in the book. I have no clue why you would want to look at some Knight offline from the 1970s. It's a really weird book. There's also a very odd chapter about opening repertoire for women, which is completely odd. I mean, I don't even know how to describe that. Anyway, that is a really weird book, and I don't really see why you should get it. You will get no particularly great new opening ideas. Maybe if you're interested in some history of the Tarrasch defense, yeah, then maybe, but it's not a really super relevant opening. So I don't quite get the book. This is the kind of book that I purchased, and 5 days later, after I've read through most of it, I decided, okay, I will sell it and I hope somebody buys it. Anyway, it makes little sense to me. Okay, so now something different. Let's go for two endgame books. And yeah, here's a book that was actually not published this year, but it's from 2013, so it's a couple of years old. And it's this one called Mastering Endgame Strategy by Johan Helston. This is a book that I had on my shelf and somehow never used. Yeah, sometimes you get those books, you put them on the shelf and think, okay, yeah, maybe that is useful, and you never use it. I mean, using it for lessons, I mean. And this year, at one point, I saw that on my shelf, and okay, let's have a look at it. Does that make any sense, this book? And it does make some sense, actually, and I think it's actually quite well written. It has this odd quality of combining relatively basic concepts in the ending with more advanced ones. So, for example, he has a chapter called Rook Themes, so it's about rooks. And he starts, and I think this is nicely chosen, he starts with some basic rook endings that everybody should know, like Lucina position and Philidor's defense on the 6th rank, things like that, but rather quickly develops them into more advanced concepts. I think it's a pretty nice ending book that is never really mentioned, and I think it can be an interesting addition to your own training. It's kind of, let's say, I always recommend the 100 Endgames by De La Via, and for more advanced stuff, the Endgame Manual by Dvoretsky. This is kind of in the middle. It has a bit of the basics, but also gives more complex examples. So it's a good middle of the road alternative to those books, or simply something that you can get in addition if you want more exercises and so on. It's a pretty good book that nobody really ever talks about, and yeah, probably because everybody goes for the Endgame Manual by Dvoretsky, but it's a good book. Okay, the next one is I think very highly recommended. It's this one, Endgame Virtuoso Magnus Carlsen. This book I like a lot. I've used it in my training sessions, lessons quite a bit, and it is about Magnus Carlsen's endgames, and it is written in chronological order. So it starts with the games that he played as a kid, like 2002, 2003, when he was 12 or 13, and he already had some very, very nice endgames at the time. In particular, some of them were very instructive because the opponents weren't that great. Yeah, he was playing like regular GMs or amateurs even sometimes, and he was winning very nice endings there. Caroline is a very prolific author. He has done great things with books on Karpov and Tal, and I think he does a good job of annotating Carlsen's endings. What I think is very nice here is that he actually focuses on the endings. He doesn't talk much about the openings. In some cases, or most cases, he actually starts with the actual ending and doesn't even mention how it got there. I like the annotation style a lot. It's not overly complicated. Like they are not. If you look at this, you can get a good impression. I mean, I don't know if you can really see it all that great. It has quite a bit of text, not so many lines, but it focuses, I think, on the most important things, the things that are essential for each position. I like it a lot. If you want an endgame book, I mean, that's not about theoretical endings, but practical endings. If you want an ending book, and if you happen to be a fan of Carlsen, it's probably even better. But even if you are not a particular fan of his chess or him as a person, whatever, he has great endgame skills, and the book is fantastic to get more into that. Excellent examples, and I think I like the annotation style. It's not super complicated. It's very accessible. So a good endgame book. A book that I also like to mention is this one. That's this one. Strike Like You Did. I wonder if you can really see that due to the way the camera operates. You can read that. That's a nice book by a FIDE master, Charles Hurton. I didn't know that person. FIDE master from the US. This is a book, it's a very light read. This is a book that is mostly about the winning tactics combinations that Judith Polgar played. Polgar was a very aggressive attacking player, and she had many great combinational win aggressive play. And this is a very light book in the sense that it doesn't have that much text, or it's mostly about tactics. And I think this is a good book that you can give to junior players to learn tactics from full games, or from a game, let's say, that are not completely disconnected from games, is what I'm trying to say. So not just a diagram, but it shows the full games, or the game from a particular point on where it gets interesting. It's also, I think, a very good book to maybe motivate girls if they are into chess. Like, I think Judith can be an excellent role model. And again, it's a very light read. It has many diagrams, not so much text. If you see here, you've got many diagrams with the flashy tactics very nicely shown. So it is possible to read that even if you are not like the blindfold king. Yeah, you can. Here's the diagram. Here are like 3 or 4 moves, and then you can easily read that. So I think it's an very accessible book, and also quite entertaining. I mean, Polgar, as mentioned, she was a very tactical and aggressive player. It's not a super deep tactical book or anything, but I think it's a good book, more on the light side. That would be, for me, a fantastic, let's say, a gift to a junior player, especially to girls. I think it could be, I think, very inspirational. A nice book that is mostly, I think, for fans of the player is this one. It's about Fabiano Caruana, the challenger to the World Championship title, by Alexander Kalinin. Kalinin, I think, is an IM, right? Oh no, he's a grandmaster. I'm sorry. And he has written a book here on Caruana, choosing his most instructive games. Again, I like the annotation style. It's not super dense, like then that you get totally overwhelmed by variations. And I think it's a good game selection. I mean, Caruana has played many good games. His I think his style of play is actually quite suitable for study, because he has a very clean style. It's he never plays something unsound or something where you they cannot recommend that to people. I mean, this is always the problem with those super creative players, like let's say Joe Bava or Report. It's they play this don't try this at home chess. And Caruana, obviously, I mean, he's an extremely strong player, and the chess is sometimes very difficult to understand because of the level that he has, but it's still kind of logical. Yeah, it's not completely irrational. I think it's nice, especially if you're a fan of the player. Yeah, that I think is kind of not necessary, but it's not it's probably not for everyone. Let's say if you're not a fan of Caruana's chess, it probably doesn't make not much sense to study it. But I mean, I think he's a very strong player, and I think instructive player, so it can be a good one to get. I see that video is getting longer than I originally thought. Anyway, so and the final book here is something that I also need to study myself a little bit more. I only got it a couple of days ago, but I wanted to mention it because it's something that I feel is very useful to look at in general. And it's this one. It's called Practical Chess Beauty by Johanan Afek. Afek is an international master in, let's say, regular chess, but he's one of the he's more known actually for his achievements in chess composition. He has composed chess studies for quite a long time now, and he's a grandmaster and one of the, I think, most prolific chess composers of today. This book is about studies, endgame studies, and We're talking about 450 pages. What Afek is really great at, he's very good at selecting positions, showing them in a way that is actually somewhat more accessible than it is often. If you sometimes you have chess studies, let's say in chess magazines, and they are really complicated, they're tough to understand, they mention some motifs that you don't know, and this is kind of accessible for a normal player, let's say. I looked through it not in a very not very detailed, so I cannot really call this an in-depth review, but I know the author. I know that he's great at these things. I've read articles that he wrote and listened to an interview and so on. It's a really great way of I think getting into studies, and it's a fantastic way actually of training. If you want to improve your endgame calculation, good endgame studies can be fantastic for that. So this is something that is in all likelihood a fantastic book, but I have not yet get into a very, very close review to that. So I cannot show you like positions that I find very remarkable also, because it's very fresh again in my library. But I would be very surprised if that isn't a great book. So I hope you enjoyed this overview of books. It's almost like 46 minutes in, and maybe you find some recommendation in there that you like or that you could think about purchasing. This will be one of the final videos for this year, I guess. I hope you all had a good year 2018, and you will all get to have a good start for 2019. Thanks a lot for watching.